Racist woman tore the dress thinking she was just a black ex-convict, her millionaire husband saw. The fabric ripped with a sound that echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. Rebecca Thornton held Shayla's dress between her perfectly manicured fingers and pulled deliberately, tearing the side seam from top to bottom. "Oops," Rebecca said, dropping the destroyed fabric like contaminated trash. "Too bad. People like you should know you don't belong in places like this." The annual Thornton Foundation Charity Gala gathered Chicago's elite at one of the city's most exclusive hotels. Crystal chandeliers imported from Austria, rare orchids decorating each table, and the discreet sound of a string quartet creating the perfect soundtrack for high society hypocrisy. Shayla Carter was 29 years old and never imagined that accepting that extra waitressing job would put her life at such a brutal crossroads. 8 months out of prison, fighting to rebuild an existence that the justice system had shattered, she needed that money to pay for the boarding house where she lived and continue her night classes in business administration at the community college. Her natural hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and she carried trays with the grace of someone who grew up balancing impossible responsibilities on her shoulders. The electronic ankle monitor was hidden under her uniform pants, a constant reminder that a single mistake could send her back to a cell. Rebecca Thornton, on the other hand, was exactly the kind of woman who considered charity events as personal runways. Wife of tech mogul Marcus Thornton, she reaped all the benefits of being born rich and marrying even richer. Her life was an endless succession of charity lunches, spa treatments, and shopping sprees that cost more than entire families' annual salaries. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Shayla said with a calmness that surprised even herself, holding the pieces of her torn uniform. "I'll change clothes immediately." "Don't worry about it," Rebecca replied loud enough to attract attention from nearby tables. "I imagine accidents are common when they hire this kind of people for important events." The venom in Rebecca's words was so toxic that several people stopped their conversations to watch the scene. Shayla felt the curious stares, some embarrassed, others clearly entertained by the free show of public humiliation. "Perhaps you should consider more qualified professionals for events of this caliber," Rebecca continued, gesturing dramatically. "People who naturally understand how to behave in refined society. People without criminal records." The last phrase was said with cruel emphasis. Shayla felt her blood freeze. That woman knew. Somehow, Rebecca Thornton had discovered about her conviction for a crime she hadn't even committed. What Rebecca didn't know was that every poisonous word was being absorbed by Shayla with the patience of someone who had survived much worse storms. Raised on Chicago's South Side by a grandmother who worked 3 jobs, Shayla had learned early that true strength doesn't shout, doesn't react impulsively. It observes, learns, and acts at precisely the right moment. "Of course, ma'am," Shayla replied, her voice maintaining a serenity that made Rebecca frown, irritated by the lack of emotional reaction. "I'll take care of everything properly." As she walked toward the kitchen holding the pieces of her uniform, Shayla discreetly passed by the main table, where an elegant gray-haired man watched the entire scene with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met for a split second, and he nodded almost imperceptibly, as if recognizing something in her that others couldn't see. Marcus Thornton had built a tech empire based on one simple rule: observe people when they think no one is paying attention. And at that moment, watching his wife publicly humiliate a young working woman, he saw 2 things with absolute clarity: Rebecca's truly cruel nature and the impressive dignity of that waitress who maintained her composure under fire. In the kitchen, Shayla finally allowed her hands to tremble slightly as she discarded the destroyed uniform. 20 minutes ago, she was just another ex-convict trying to rebuild her life. Now she felt a growing determination, as if the universe was preparing something much bigger than a simple night's work. 3.5 years in maximum security prison for a crime she didn't commit had taught Shayla a crucial lesson: the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. And people like Rebecca Thornton were the pillars that sustained it. What no one in that luxurious ballroom could imagine was that the simple waitress Rebecca had just attacked held secrets that would turn the humiliation into the catalyst for a turnaround none of them would ever forget. While changing into a spare uniform in the locker room, Shayla discreetly touched the small device attached under the collar of her reserve shirt. The digital recorder that an investigative journalist friend had lent her the previous week, saying, "If you find something, document everything." 23 minutes of explicit discrimination, personal attacks, and calculated cruelty. All perfectly recorded in crystal-clear quality. Shayla looked at her reflection in the foggy locker room mirror and, for the first time in months, allowed herself a small smile. Not of joy, but of recognition. The universe was handing her exactly what she needed. Rebecca Thornton was about to discover that humiliating people without knowing their full story can cost much more than any fortune could buy. If you're following this story of injustice and overcoming, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover how a simple ex-convict waitress was about to turn the tables against the privileged elite who thought they could destroy her without consequences. Rebecca wasn't finished. While Shayla returned from the kitchen in a clean uniform, the socialite had found her perfect audience, a circle of high society women who hung on her every word as if she were revealing the secrets of the universe. "Did you see that?" Rebecca gestured dramatically, her voice loaded with theatrical indignation. The audacity of some people thinking they can just infiltrate our events. Clearly, someone in the organization didn't screen the staff properly. Margaret Wellington, heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune, nodded vigorously. "Darling, you're absolutely right. These people need to understand boundaries, especially those with criminal backgrounds." Shayla returned to the main hall and immediately felt the weight of their stares. Rebecca's group had grown, and she could hear snippets of their venomous conversation as she refilled glasses at a nearby table. Of course she came back. She probably needs this job desperately. Imagine having to work like this after being in prison. At least she knows her place now and didn't try to talk back. Rebecca noticed Shayla's presence and deliberately raised her voice. "Anyway, girls, I suppose we shouldn't be too harsh. After all, not everyone gets a second chance after making such terrible life choices. Some people are just born to serve." What Rebecca didn't know was that Shayla had spent 1,277 days in prison studying law books borrowed from the prison library. That she had befriended 3 wrongfully convicted lawyers who taught her everything about documentation, evidence collection, and how the justice system could be turned against those who manipulated it. That at 19, she had taken the fall for her younger brother's mistake, protecting him from a system that would have destroyed his future. Shayla finished setting the table in silence, but Margaret decided to add her own contribution to the public humiliation. "Dear," she addressed Shayla directly, her voice dripping with condescension. "You understand that workers with your background should remain especially discreet during events, don't you? Avoid drawing any unnecessary attention." "Yes, ma'am," Shayla replied, maintaining respectful but firm eye contact. "I understand perfectly." Something in Shayla's tone made Margaret frown. There was an articulation, a presence that didn't fit the stereotype she expected to find. Rebecca noticed her friend's hesitation and decided to intensify the attack. "Margaret is absolutely right." Rebecca stood up, approaching Shayla with a cruel smile. "In fact, perhaps we should discuss proper protocol for people with criminal histories. Tell me, dear, what were you in prison for? Theft? Drugs?" The question was asked with calculated malice, loud enough for other tables to hear. An uncomfortable silence spread through the nearby area, and Shayla felt dozens of eyes fixed on her, waiting for her reaction. For a moment, the old Shayla wanted to explode. To tell this privileged woman exactly what 3.5 years in a maximum security prison felt like. To describe the night she was arrested at 19, taking the blame for her 16-year-old brother who had been caught with drugs that weren't even his. To explain how she had sacrificed her entire future so her brother could go to college, get married, become a teacher. But the new Shayla, the one who had survived and learned, simply smiled. "Possession with intent to distribute, ma'am," she answered calmly. "Though I was later proven innocent through DNA evidence. The charges were expunged last year." Rebecca's smile faltered for just a second. That wasn't the reaction she wanted. She wanted tears, anger, something she could use to further justify her cruelty. "Well," Rebecca recovered quickly, "innocent or not, prison is prison. And people who've been there carry that stain forever, don't you think, girls?" The women nodded eagerly, but Shayla noticed something interesting. Marcus Thornton had stood up from the main table and was slowly walking toward the group. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was clenched tight. "Rebecca," he said softly, his voice carrying a tone she immediately recognized as warning. "Perhaps it's time we focused on the real purpose of this evening. Charity." "Of course, darling," Rebecca said, quickly changing her demeanor. "Just ensuring everyone understands the proper standards." Marcus looked directly at Shayla. "I apologize for any discomfort you've experienced this evening. That's not what this event is about." Shayla nodded respectfully, but as she turned to continue her work, She heard Rebecca whisper loudly to Margaret, "He's always been too soft on these people. That's why they never learn their place." In that moment, something shifted in Shayla's chest. Not anger, but clarity. For 8 months, she had been trying to be invisible, to simply survive and rebuild quietly. But Rebecca Thornton had just reminded her of something crucial. People like this would never see her as human unless forced to. As she walked through the ballroom, Shayla's hand instinctively touched the recorder under her collar. Every word was there. Every cruel laugh. Every deliberate humiliation. But she knew from her time in prison that evidence alone wasn't enough. She needed strategy. She needed leverage. She needed to understand exactly who Rebecca Thornton was and what she valued most. What Rebecca didn't realize was that while she was busy performing her cruelty for an audience, Shayla was doing what she did best: observing, documenting, and planning. The same skills that had kept her alive in prison were now being deployed in a very different kind of battlefield. And this time, Shayla wasn't going to take the fall for anyone. This time, justice would be served exactly as it should be: cold, calculated, and absolutely devastating. Shayla took refuge in the hotel's elegant bathroom and finally allowed herself to breathe. Not from fear, but from controlled adrenaline she knew well from her days surviving the prison hierarchy. She discreetly removed the small digital recorder from her uniform pocket and checked the recording quality. Crystal clear. 47 minutes of racial slurs, explicit discrimination, and intentional humiliation, all perfectly documented. But documentation alone wouldn't be enough. She had learned that lesson the hard way. Her phone buzzed. A text from Diana Chun, the investigative journalist who had covered her exoneration case 8 months ago. "How's the gala? Getting anything useful?" Shayla's fingers moved quickly across the screen. "More than useful. I need your help with something bigger." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "I'm listening." 20 minutes later, Shayla was sitting in a secluded corner of the hotel's service hallway, away from the prying eyes of the event. Diana had sent her detailed background research on Rebecca Thornton, and what Shayla found was a gold mine. Rebecca sat on the board of 3 major charitable foundations. She was the public face of Second Chances Initiative, an organization supposedly dedicated to helping formerly incarcerated individuals reintegrate into society. The irony was so thick Shayla almost laughed out loud. But there was more. Diana had also sent financial records, public documents showing that Rebecca's foundations had received millions in government grants specifically earmarked for criminal justice reform. Money that was supposed to help people exactly like Shayla. "She's been stealing from us," Shayla whispered to herself, her mind racing through possibilities. Another text from Diana: "I've been investigating her for 6 months. Can't prove misuse of funds yet. Need someone on the inside. You interested?" Shayla's hands trembled as she typed her response. This was bigger than personal revenge. This was about exposing systematic corruption that affected thousands of people like her. "What do you need?" "Access to the foundation's internal documents. Employee testimonies. Anything that shows where the money really goes." Before Shayla could respond, the bathroom door opened. She quickly pocketed her phone and stood up, but stopped when she saw who it was. Marcus Thornton stood in the hallway, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "Shayla, may I speak with you? I know this is irregular, but—" "Mr. Thornton, I don't think it's appropriate for us to—" "Please," he interrupted, his voice carrying genuine distress. "Just 5 minutes. I need to apologize properly for my wife's unacceptable behavior." Shayla studied him carefully. 29 years of life, 3.5 of them in prison, had taught her to read people quickly. In Marcus's eyes, she saw something she rarely found in wealthy white men: genuine shame and anger directed at his own family. 5 minutes, she agreed. They moved to an empty conference room adjacent to the ballroom. Marcus closed the door and immediately began pacing. "I don't know what to say except that what you witnessed tonight is inexcusable. Rebecca has always had prejudices, but I've never seen her be so openly cruel. Mr. Thornton, with all due respect, you're not responsible for your wife's actions." "But I am," Marcus said firmly. 26 years of marriage have given me countless opportunities to challenge behavior like this. I chose comfort over conscience. I chose silence over what was right." Shayla remained quiet, letting him continue. I overheard her mention your criminal record. May I ask what happened? For reasons she couldn't fully explain, Shayla found herself telling him the truth. About her brother. About the sacrifice. About 3.5 years in maximum security for a crime she didn't commit. About the DNA evidence that finally freed her but couldn't give back the years she lost. Marcus listened without interrupting, and when she finished, his jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle twitching. My God, Shayla. And tonight, my wife publicly humiliated you for that sacrifice. It's not the first time, Mr. Thornton. It won't be the last. It should be, Marcus said quietly. Then, after a long pause, what do you do when you're not working events like this? I'm studying business administration at night. Trying to rebuild my life. Trying to help others who've been through the system. Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing. Shayla, I'm going to give you my personal number. If you ever need anything, a reference, help with school, job opportunities, anything, please contact me directly. Shayla took the card he offered, but didn't commit to anything. Trust wasn't something she gave easily anymore. Why are you doing this? She asked directly. Because I've spent too long being complicit in a system that destroys people like you, while people like my wife profit from your suffering. He paused. And because something tells me you're not just a waitress trying to get by. There's something in your eyes, a determination I recognize. You're planning something. Shayla's poker face, honed through countless prison interrogations, remained perfectly neutral. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Thornton. Yes, you do. Marcus smiled sadly. And whatever it is, I want you to know that not everyone in that ballroom agrees with my wife's worldview. After he left, Shayla sat alone in the conference room, her mind working through the pieces of a plan that was slowly taking shape. She had the recording. She had Diana's investigative resources. And now, unexpectedly, she might have an ally in the most unlikely place, Rebecca Thornton's own husband. Her phone buzzed again. Diana had sent links to 3 former employees of Rebecca's foundations, all willing to talk about financial irregularities, all too afraid to go public without protection. Shayla responded quickly, set up meetings. I'll get them the protection they need. As she prepared to return to the ballroom and finish her shift, Shayla caught her reflection in the conference room's window. The woman staring back at her looked different from the scared ex-convict who had walked into that hotel 4 hours ago. That woman had been trying to survive invisibly. This woman was preparing to burn everything down and rebuild it correctly. Rebecca Thornton had made a fatal mistake tonight. She had assumed that someone with a criminal record was powerless, voiceless, and broken. What she didn't understand was that prison hadn't broken Shayla. It had forged her into something much more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. 3 weeks later, Rebecca Thornton woke up to 89 missed calls and a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. When she opened the first link Margaret had sent at 6:47 a.m., she felt like the floor had opened beneath her feet. Charity fraud exposed. Foundation director caught in racist tirade against ex-convict she claims to help, screamed the Chicago Tribune headline. Below it was a photo of her at the gala, her expression of disdain frozen for eternity. But it wasn't just the photo. It was the audio. 47 minutes of her voice, crystal clear, playing on every major news station in the city. Every venomous word she had uttered against Shayla echoed across airwaves, accompanied by outraged commentary from hosts and devastating testimony from witnesses. Rebecca's hands shook as she scrolled through social media. The hashtag Rebecca Torndress was trending nationally. Her Instagram had lost 47,000 followers overnight. The comments were brutal. You steal from people trying to rebuild their lives. My sister was in prison. She's worth 10 of you. Hope you enjoy the fall from your high horse. But the audio was just the beginning. The Tribune article detailed journalist Diana Chen's 6-month investigation into Rebecca's 3 charitable foundations. The Second Chances Initiative had received $8.2 million in government grants to help formerly incarcerated individuals, but spent only $340,000 on actual programs. The rest had been funneled through consulting fees to companies owned by Rebecca's family members. Rebecca ran downstairs, finding Marcus in the kitchen with his laptop open and an expression she had never seen before. Cold. Distant. Final. Marcus, you have to do something, she cried, waving her phone frantically. This is a coordinated attack. That waitress is trying to destroy us. That waitress, Marcus said without looking up, is named Shayla Carter. She spent 3.5 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit, protecting her younger brother. And after listening to this audio, I completely understand why she documented every word you said. Rebecca froze. What are you saying? I'm saying that Shayla contacted me a week after the gala. She showed me everything, the financial records, the testimonies from 12 former employees you bullied and fired when they questioned the accounting. The families who never received help while you posted Instagram photos from 5-star hotels charged to program development. You're working with her? Rebecca's voice rose to a shriek. Against your own wife. I'm working with the FBI, Marcus corrected, finally looking at her. I've been cooperating with their investigation for 2 weeks. Shayla and Diana Chun brought them a case so airtight that the agent said it was the cleanest fraud documentation they'd seen in years. At that moment, Rebecca's phone rang. It was Patricia Whitmore, chair of the Lakeshore Country Club where Rebecca had been a member for 18 years. Rebecca, the board held an emergency session this morning, Patricia said without preamble. Your membership has been revoked immediately. The behavior in that audio, combined with the fraud allegations, makes you incompatible with our values. Before Rebecca could respond, the call ended. Then her phone exploded with notifications. The WhatsApp group Ladies Who Lunch was in chaos, all messages about her. Margaret called, crying about being subpoenaed to testify. Rebecca's email showed letters from all 3 foundation boards, unanimously voting to remove her from every position. An IRS audit notice. A subpoena to appear before a grand jury in 14 days. Someone had created a GoFundMe for Shayla Carter's education fund. It had raised $340,000 in 18 hours, exactly the amount Rebecca's foundation had actually spent on programs after taking $8.2 million in grants. The irony is beautiful, isn't it? Marcus said quietly. Shayla will receive more genuine help from strangers in 1 day than your foundations provided in 3 years. Rebecca collapsed into a chair, her carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. You can't divorce me over this. Think about what it will do to your reputation. My lawyers filed the papers yesterday, Marcus replied. And as for my reputation, I'm donating $15 million to legitimate criminal justice reform organizations. I'm also funding full college scholarships for 50 formerly incarcerated individuals, starting with Shayla Carter. You're giving our money to criminals? Rebecca's voice was shrill with disbelief. I'm giving my money to people who deserve a second chance. You, on the other hand, will be lucky if you don't end up in the same prison system you exploited for profit. At that precise moment, the doorbell rang. Through the window, Rebecca saw 2 black SUVs parked in their circular driveway. 4 federal agents in suits stood at the door. Rebecca Thornton, the lead agent, asked when Marcus opened the door. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement of federal funds, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Rebecca watched in horror as they read her Miranda rights. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists, cold metal against skin that had only ever known silk and cashmere. As they led her to the SUV, she saw neighbors peeking through windows. Phones recording. The beginning of her perp walk going viral in real time. Meanwhile, across the city, Shayla sat in Diana Chen's office, watching the arrest on live television. Marcus had called her 30 minutes earlier to give her advance warning. How does it feel? Diana asked quietly. Shayla was silent for a long moment. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like justice finally working the way it's supposed to. Her phone showed messages from the 12 former foundation employees who had agreed to testify. From families who had been denied help. From other formerly incarcerated individuals thanking her for exposing the system that had failed them all. But the message that meant the most was from her brother. I'm so proud of you. You took the fall for me once. Now you're standing up for everyone. I love you. Rebecca Thornton had torn her dress thinking she was destroying a powerless ex-convict. Instead, she had awakened something far more dangerous. A woman who understood exactly how the system worked and how to make it serve justice instead of privilege. 6 months later, Shayla stood in front of a lecture hall at Northwestern University, addressing 300 students in a criminal justice reform class. She wore a tailored navy suit, her natural hair styled in elegant locks. The ankle monitor was gone. The haunted look in her eyes had been replaced by something powerful: purpose. "The night Rebecca Thornton tore my dress, she saw a criminal," Shayla said, her voice steady and clear. She didn't see a woman who had sacrificed 3.5 years to protect her younger brother. She didn't see someone who had spent every day in prison studying law books and documenting injustices. She saw what she wanted to see, and that blind prejudice became her downfall. The students listened in rapt attention. Shayla's story had become a case study in universities across the country, a perfect example of how systemic corruption intersected with personal prejudice. After the lecture, Shayla drove to the office of Carter & Chun Consulting, the firm she had founded with Diana 4 months earlier. Their specialty: investigating charitable organizations for fraud and discrimination. They had 12 clients already, including 3 federal agencies. The GoFundMe that had raised $340,000 for her education had grown to $890,000 after her story went fully viral. Shayla had used half to finish her degree at Northwestern with full honors. The other half funded scholarships for 10 other formerly incarcerated individuals pursuing higher education. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Rebecca Thornton sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for charity fraud. Shayla read the article carefully. Rebecca had been convicted on 17 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. The judge had been particularly harsh, noting that she had betrayed the trust of society's most vulnerable members while living in unconscionable luxury. The same maximum security facility where Shayla had spent 3.5 years. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Marcus had testified against his ex-wife, providing financial records that proved Rebecca's deliberate fraud. His divorce had been finalized within 90 days, and he had donated $15 million to legitimate reform organizations. He had also hired Shayla as a consultant for his tech company, tasking her with overhauling their hiring practices to eliminate bias against formerly incarcerated applicants. Her recommendations had been so effective that 12 other Fortune 500 companies had requested similar audits. Margaret Wellington had turned state's evidence, testifying about foundation board meetings where Rebecca had openly discussed diverting grant money. In exchange for cooperation, Margaret received probation and 500 hours of community service at a genuine re-entry program. Shayla's brother Daniel had graduated from Teachers College and was now teaching at an alternative school for at-risk youth. He called her every Sunday, still thanking her for the sacrifice she had made and the courage she had shown. That evening, her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Shayla, I wanted you to know before it goes public. I'm establishing the Carter Foundation for Criminal Justice Reform. $20 million in initial funding. I'd like you to serve as executive director." Shayla was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, I appreciate everything you've done, but I need to ask, why? Why are you really doing all of this?" "Because that night at the gala, I saw my wife destroy another human being for entertainment," Marcus said quietly. "And I realized I had been complicit in that worldview for decades. I can't undo the damage I've enabled, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to repair it." "I'll think about the foundation," Shayla replied. "But I have conditions. Full transparency, community oversight, and formerly incarcerated individuals in every level of leadership. I wouldn't have it any other way." After the call ended, Shayla walked to her apartment window overlooking Lake Michigan. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She thought about the woman she had been 8 months ago, scared, trying to be invisible, accepting humiliation as the price of survival. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that the best response to injustice wasn't silence or rage, it was strategic, documented, systematic change. Rebecca Thornton had torn her dress thinking she was putting a criminal in her place. Instead, she had torn away the final remnants of Shayla's fear and hesitation. She had inadvertently created the exact person who would expose the corruption she represented. The torn dress had been replaced by tailored suits. The ankle monitor by business cards. The shame by purpose. Shayla's phone showed a notification from the scholarship fund she had created. 15 more formerly incarcerated individuals had been awarded full college scholarships. Each one represented a life that wouldn't be defined by their worst mistake. Each one was proof that the system could change when people refused to accept injustice as inevitable. She thought about Rebecca in that federal cell, finally experiencing the reality of the prison system she had profited from. Shayla felt no joy in that suffering, but she felt something equally important: validation that actions have consequences, even for the privileged. The lesson was simple but powerful: underestimating people because of their past is dangerous. Exploiting the vulnerable while claiming to help them is criminal. And sometimes, the person you try to destroy becomes the catalyst for justice you can't escape. Shayla Carter had been torn down by prejudice, imprisoned by injustice, and humiliated by cruelty. But she had rebuilt herself into something unbreakable, a woman who turned suffering into purpose and used her voice to ensure others wouldn't have to endure the same. Rebecca had tried to put her in her place. Instead, Shayla had claimed a place at the table where decisions were made, policies were written, and lives were changed. The waitress had become the director. The ex-convict had become the reformer. And the woman who had once absorbed humiliation in silence had become the voice that demanded justice be served fairly for everyone. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something so meaningful, so impactful, that your oppressors realized too late they awakened exactly the person who would dismantle everything they built on corruption and cruelty. Shayla smiled at her reflection in the window. She had survived prison. She had survived prejudice. And now she was thriving in ways Rebecca Thornton could never have imagined. The dress had been torn. But Shayla Carter had been rebuilt, stronger and more determined than ever. If this story of transformation and justice moved you, subscribe to the channel for more true accounts of people who refuse to let prejudice define them and instead use their pain to create lasting change in a system that desperately needs it.